I go to Facebook and Instagram and wherever I am, plaster my videos all over the social media world. But yeah, I,
YouTube right now.
we just do it. Okay, so we're on YouTube right now.
Yep.
Okay. Well, all right. So we're recording, yes, and thank you everyone for anyone who's going to see this. My name is Sorah Dubitsky, and I am a student, practitioner, teacher of A Course in Miracles. I am also a psychology teacher. I've been teaching and studying psychology, wow, a long, long time. And lately, or most recently, I've been teaching the psychology of sexual behavior. And you said, what does sex have to do with spirituality? Well, that's one of these days we'll go into that. Um, and what else? Oh, and I do many I do many things, but A Course in Miracles has been the foundation of my spiritual life for well, I think 45 years. And it continues to be the foundation of my spiritual life. And then I've been doing these classes or talks for a few weeks now. And what I find is that it's still confusing. My intention in doing these talks is to talk to people who think that there's something weird about this world. And I tell my story, and I will start by this talk by telling my story. And like many of us, I look around the world and say, if God created this world, then there is no God. Or this God is there's this theme about God as a trickster, um, or as God as being enigmatic, and ineffable. We don't know who he is or what he wants. There was a book many years ago, when bad things happen to good people, and that I didn't read the book, but that's a theme, that bad things happen to good people, and maybe it's karma, like at some level you deserve to have this happen. Or in more new age circles, there was a lesson you needed to learn and God was teaching you a lesson. uh, I don't think, from a miracles perspective, that's not, oh, look, hi, Steve, you're driving again. If you were in my classes, yeah, right. If you were in my class, I would say, get that video off. This is not safe, but you're not in my regular classes. So, oh, okay, thank you. Your safety is really important. So what I was going to begin with was, again, my story and then a story of where A Course in Miracles came from, to just ground this teaching. Those of us like Steve, like Lynn, who've been with it for a while, just get it. It becomes what the teachings are become, and I like to use the word embodied, just become a part of who you are. But newer people or people seeking may not get it right away, because some of it can sound so obtuse that it's like, that doesn't make sense. So we start with a story. I'll start with my story, how I came to want to study, or how I came to want to know that there's something else in the world. There's a better way of living in the world, or that this world doesn't make sense. So I grew up in a household where my mother had repeated mental breakdowns, and she had to leave her mother in Austria, uh, after Hitler invaded. So this goes back, so this was like around 1938, 39. And because my father used to say she had survivor's guilt, but because she had these repeated breakdowns, I always, questioned psychology. That made me think, like, why is this happening? And because I grew up with people, my parents' friends who had tattoos on their arms, who had been experimented on so they couldn't have children, who carried, this residue of having been in camps, of having been through something horrific. So I grew up with this idea that how could God, if there's a God, how could he let this happen? So for many, many years, I did not believe in God. What comes to mind, this joke about, the dyslexic agnostic who didn't believe, who doubted the existence of dog. Well, sorry about that. But I grew up with this idea that, God had nothing to do with me, or God had nothing to do with this world, or, how can you pray to a God that smites you, on the Sabbath if you pick up a match. So that was my background. Agnosticism, doubting the existence of God, but just in case, I didn't want to give up completely, just in case. Like at the end, whenever that was, I wanted to be welcomed in, and it's like, no, you didn't believe in me. So, but that was my background. And 1980 was, one of those years that was pivotal, and it was the worst, probably up to that point, the worst year of my life. And my world had been shattered. I had my own breakdown, and everything I believed prior to that came into question. And I was sincerely looking for answers. How could that happen to me? Here I thought I was so stable, and what's the image, like, grounded and wise and smart, all of these adjectives, and yet I had a breakdown. And as I was going through the healing process, I found astrology. I went to an astrology conference, and the speaker, who I still know, a woman named Diane Gusick, started out her talk with with this saying, or by saying, oh, I think here, show meeting. There we are. She started out, thank you, Lynn, for that, by the way. Um, she started out her talk by saying, "We are whole." And it was like somebody opened a door, because up to that point I did not feel whole. I felt very fragmented, still in a healing process. And when I heard those words, "we were whole," it's like, okay, show me where to go, show me what to do. And I had a reading with Diane, and that started my journey. Those three words, "we are whole." Um, A Course in Miracles, I'll get back to my story later, began around 1965. It was written, or received by a psychologist, Helen Schuckman, who was very, I'd never met her. I've done some reading about her. I have heard her speak, on recordings. She was a research psychologist, very rigid in her thinking, very academically oriented. She also had a background in the Bible, which is another. She was raised by a nanny who used to take her to church, and even though she was Jewish, but her parents were non-practicing, more, I say cultural Jews, even if that. Um, and she worked at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. This was in Upper Manhattan, and again, the year was about 1965. Her immediate supervisor was a man named Bill Thetford, and he was a clinical psychologist, also doing research. He was doing research in what was called abnormal psychology. I believe it's still called abnormal psychology. Um, and I actually, when I was in school, I went back to school, and I was in school, I looked up some of his research. He had been the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Abnormal Psychology. So he was a very prestigious job. Also very academically minded. And the way it's described is that they were in a very competitive situation. Academia could be very competitive, and a lot of backstabbing and very, very stressful. So one day, Bill made this declaration, and that, there's got to be a better way. I don't want to live like this anymore. There's got to be a better way. And Helen, who worked under him, said, okay, I will join you. We will look for a better way. Now, anybody who has high stress jobs, sometimes thinks that, like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then shortly after they agreed to find a better way of being in the world, of living with, all the stressors they had to live with, Helen started hearing an inner voice. And the inner voice was saying, this is A Course in Miracles. Please take notes. And she thought she was going crazy. Here were these people who worked with abnormal psychology, and she was having abnormal experiences. And then voice, this is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. And Helen called Bill, her superior, and said, hey, I'm not going, am I going crazy? I'm hearing this voice. This is what it's saying. And Bill responded with something like, well, why don't you do what it says? Take notes. So that began, how many years? From about 1965 to 1975-ish, like as I'm not remembering exactly how many years, but they like over a 7-year period. I think that's the time. Helen would receive material, take it down in shorthand. The inner voice was directing her, and she would take it down in shorthand. Then she would come into the office, and they kept this hidden. Research psychologists, academic psychologists did not hear inner voices. I was told that when I was in graduate school. One of my faculty, I was telling him this story, and he just looked at me and said, research psychologists do not hear inner voices. Well, over the 7-year period, Helen Juckman, heard an inner voice and received this 1,200-page tome. And then they didn't know what to do with it. So they kept it in a drawer. And then another person came along. There was a cast of characters. Another person came along, a woman named Judy Shuckman. And she had interests in academia, plus she was also interested in parapsychology, and she had a parapsychology research institute. And she was introduced to Helen and Bill through another party. And during this lunch meeting she had with Helen and Bill, she had never met them before. She had no idea, what their interests were, what was going on. And she turned to Helen and said, "You've been hearing an inner voice, haven't you?" And then they retired, to another office and showed Judy the material. So I began by, and I'm doing a time check here. Just, I have an hour. Okay. Um, I began this talk with like my story, and then I went into the story of Helen and Bill. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is to kind of ground what this material is in ordinary experience. I mean, Helen and Bill were academicians, so they were smart, uh, meaning they were in that world of academia. Um, and not that I'm smart, but they were having an experience in this world. They were having first the experience of being highly stressed and worried about jobs, and worrying about colleagues, and making sure that in academia the phrase is publish or perish, making sure they're getting their research out. um, and in my story, I went back to school actually, but I needed something to hold on to. So like Helen and Bill, they needed something to give them a different perspective. How do you deal in the world? How do you live in this world, and still be peaceful? And this was 1965. In my story, how do I live in this world and be peaceful and become whole and become and know myself better. So after that experience I had with Diane Gusick and We Are Whole, again, a series of other events occurred. And about I heard 6 or 8 months later, um, I was living on Long Island and going through some marital difficulties. And the person I met, coincidence, miracle, was a man named Saul Steinberg. And he was the original printer of A Course in Miracles. And at the time, we needed a printer or wanted a printer. And I looked up printers or advertising agencies. Anyway, I came across his name. And Coleman Publishing was his company, and Saul Steinberg, and it said Printers of A Course in Miracles. I'm like, okay. So I called him. And I wound up meeting him, and he wound up giving me this book. And at the time, it was 3 books, a text, a workbook, and a manual for teachers, 3 big volumes. And I started reading it and didn't understand a word it said. Long Island, again, another coincidence or miracle. Long Island had a big Course in Miracles study group. And I was able to connect with that study group. And the course answered all the questions that I had. And so what I'm going to do now is go over, and I've gone over this before, a diagram, pictures of what the thought system is of A Course in Miracles. And that sounds weird. So I'm like, what do you mean by a thought system? So this world, before I get to the diagram, this world is governed by a thought system of fear. Um, I don't know if anybody watching this remembers Maud, the show Maud. She was married to Walter, and her catchphrase was going to be, "God's going to get you." God's going to get you, Walter. This fear that somehow, somewhere, God's going to get us. It's we're born, we grow up, we get married, and then we die, and that's life. And it's that fear of death that spurs us, to grow, really. We're afraid more of what's not going to happen than what happens. So there's this existential threat. Something's going to happen that a lot of people live with, and they don't even understand it. And it comes in many, many forms. And that's so the thought system of the world is be afraid. I don't know if anyone is political or not political, but right now that message about be afraid seems to be resonant, or echoed or magnified, in some of the stuff that's going on politically. Be afraid, be very afraid. And what the course presents is a thought system based on love. And that's kind of the core of what this talk is about at 3 p.m. I want to say to be continued. That's the core of what this talk is about, that there is a thought system and a way of looking at the world that is based on fear. And there's a thought system or a way of looking at the world based on love. The world of love, and I'm going to show the diagram now, the world of love is based on connection. The world of fear is based on separation. So let me, here's the hide meeting, and I'm going to, okay. So this is a diagram, as you can tell, of what A Course in Miracles thought system presents. Okay. And every spiritual path has its own creation story. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, God created the world in 7 days, and he looked at it, and he said it was good. We don't talk about that much, that it was good. But God created the world. There's other creation stories. My husband's favorite story was about an Indian tribe or in the South Pacific who said that the world was created by a giant turtle who had a bowel movement, and that gave rise to the whole world. I'm tempering my language. Those are two creation stories. The Course's creation story is what this is. So the reason I'm going into this creation story is because that idea of who we are in relationship to the world and in relation to some divinity is central to how we go about our lives, how we see the world, how the world is governed based on how we think we got here and who we are. I hope this is making sense. So in the course's thought system, or in the beginning, is and I have also studied some other disciplines, including the Kabbalah, which is mystical Judaism, and mystical Judaism has a very similar story. That in the beginning, that's what this is. I can get rid of my floating. Okay, I can do that. So in the beginning, I'm not going to go through, I'll go through some of it superficially, but over the next few weeks, I would like to, go use this diagram and go into a little bit more depth. I'm also thinking of doing a beginner's workshop, where we, go even deeper into the concepts and how to practice. So in the beginning, uh, there was total oneness. And I have some words here: love, God, reality, original nature, heaven. Ein Sof is the name of God. It means endless light. And that's how the Kabbalah, mystical Judaism, depicts God as endless light. And which would be, formless, but all encompassing, which is how A Course in Miracles talks about God, formless, but also all encompassing. And some words here: love, God, reality with a capital R, our original nature. In Buddhism, they talk about original nature as being love, as being connection, and as heaven is another word that the Course uses: a state of oneness, a state of not, well, here's the word, non-duality, a state of perfect peace, perfect oneness, peace, purity, innocence. These are all words. And in the beginning, there was a connection, between the creator, or the creative principle, and the creation. That's what this represents. This is the creation. Remember, you've seen um, uh, the picture of Daniel and God. I think it's Daniel, or Adam and God, where they're touching. I think that's Adam. And they're touching fingers, no separation. And it's hard for us to imagine what that is. We live in a world of duality. Everything is separate. And bodies are separate. In a world of perfect oneness, there's no separation. Everything is connected to everything else, and therefore, there's nothing to fear, because everything is you. Everything is a part of you. So what this depicts is, what this little light bulb is, this idea where the creation, this hand, thought of the idea of separation. Like, no, I am separate from you. I am separate from creator. I'm alone. I'm helpless. I'm miserable. Or I'm the ruler of my own kingdom. I don't need outside influence. Thinking of other words here. And what that's called is a descent into darkness and separation, duality. And that's so there's a separation here from perfect oneness, and then there's a separation here from what the Course calls wrong mind, which is a belief in separation and anger and attack, and I have to protect myself because I'm limited, and something can happen to me. And then on this side, the memory of love continues. And I think it's 301. I don't, like these ideas I was talking to some friends, like who saw the video, um, and some of the ideas just seem so obvious. Well, of course, love, of course, love is the only reality. I mean, of course it is. That doesn't everyone know that? Or people, good people, live their lives that way. To be good. And yet this side, and that's what this side represents. Higher consciousness, awareness of duality, the voice of sanity, following the path of remembering original nature. And so when I talk about thought systems, I'm talking about this major thought system based on love and light and memory of who we are, and in the beginning, we were untouchable. Um, Maybe not as bodies, but in spirit. We were, what words do I have? We were heroes of our own journey. We were aware of the heroship we had. We were aware that we were in charge of our own journey. We were aware of our connection. On this side of the diagram, like as soon as this idea of separation entered in, we had, let's see, I have two emotions, two instincts, um, two inclinations, two effects. This is the birth of what we call the ego. So as soon as you believe you're separate from everyone and everything, including a loving creator, you have the birth of the I. And I needs to be protected. Ego needs to be protected. And, we have all kinds of layered protection mechanisms. Sigmund Freud called them defense mechanisms to keep our ego structure, who we think we are, intact. So on this side of this diagram is who we think we are, and this side of this diagram is who we are. And then, the last thing, and I'm going to come back to this diagram a lot. The last thing is we have these two ways of looking at the world in our mind. And one way to look at the world, that's what this, call an ego stereo. Ego stereo is that voice of fear. And another way of looking at the world is through, the spirit stereo, through the eyes of love. And that translates, which thought system am I going to look through the eyes of love, or am I going to look through the eyes of fear? That translates into how we deal with others, how we deal in the world, how we see the world. So you could see this guy isn't that happy, and this person is happy, and this person is lives a life of forgiving, lives a life of mercy, equality. I have a typo there. No separate interests. Forgiving others' innocence. Forgiveness is the major practice of A Course in Miracles, or the mechanism of the miracle. And then on this side, there's blame and victimization and nightmares and inequality and separate interests. And like I said, I will come back to this. And what the miracle is, remember, this is A Course in Miracles. What the miracle is a shift from, we call it wrong-minded thinking, meaning identifying with a limitless or limited separate self, or right-minded thinking, which is identifying with a limitless self that is only here for one purpose, and that's to love. So I will be going through this diagram again. It's 3:06. If we, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to just show the meeting. Lynn, comments, questions? Steve, comments, questions? I'm sure you're driving still. Anything else you would like to see or hear?
I think this
Otherwise,
is really good as a kind of a beginner thing for people who don't know the course. So I appreciate that you're doing that because most of our audience are people who know the course and study the course for years and years, but there's a lot of people that haven't. So I appreciate this very much.
that's why this what came to me, like this is what I want to do. Um, people, I did not to judge the world, but it's nuts right now. And I mean, it's always been nuts, war, and I use the word nuts in terms of war and famine and, people hurting other people and, growing up. I often think people who don't have some kind of tool, and maybe it's therapy, some kind of tool to cling to, like, wow, this world is, nuts. How the same questioning I had as a little girl, how can people hurt each other? How can people who've been thrown into concentration camps? We're building concentration camps now in this country. Yeah, that's I thought we got rid of that like what year? Like the late 1930s. This is we're going on 100 years later, and what, we're repeating the same thing. So to look at the world through the eyes of love and the eyes of forgiveness, and allowing people who may not have, tools to work with, to be able to look at the world in a different way. So, and I did this today. I'll repeat it. How long did it take you to kind of get what the course was saying when you started it?
Oh, me? Oh,
Yeah,
right
I
away.
don't know where Steve is.
Okay,
So
yeah, right away, because I had been a Buddhist and I had been studying and all that. So as soon
okay,
as I read it, like nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal. Is okay, this is
right.
this is what this is for me. So,
Okay, so
uh,
I had no background in anything spiritual, and I'd say it took like a good 3 months before I started before it started gelling, and before I could kind of integrate it into what my life was and where I was going. So, that's what I would like to do. So I invite anyone who is not aware of the course, anyone who's searching for answers. Um, for me, my path to find answers was A Course in Miracles, and it's basically the awareness that I am connected to Source, God, universe, um, and my purpose here is to love, and that kind of ease. And there's a whole metaphysical discipline. It's not that simple, but it is that simple. We are here, to quote Jesus Christ, which we'll talk about, maybe in the next couple of weeks. Forgive them, they know not what they're doing. That we're running around here, trying to get rich maybe, or achieve goals. And our only purpose here is to love, and the love becomes like becomes to the forefront, and the other goals, will follow from that, but the important goal or objective is to just be loving, and that's very simple. Okay, so with that, Lynn, I know I could have the whole hour, but I'm done. I think 45 minutes is a really good time, and I appreciate the time, and I appreciate anybody who watches. If you are looking for a path, if you're looking for more answers, um, the practice of A Course in Miracles well, has been my answer. And you can write to me and, sorah@gmail.com if you have any questions. I'm going to be posting this on my Substack, or a link to my Substack, drsorahDubitsky.substack.com. I also have a podcast that I do with a former student, Carolina Freire. And we talk about sex. Let's talk sex, birds, bees, and beyond. And again, my message, my purpose here, my purpose in doing these talks, um, is to share love, and to provide some sense that the answers that we're seeking, we already have, and that we can turn within to that thought system of love. And that's where healing is. And I think that's it. I could go on forever about this. So, Lynn, thank you. I will see you next week, 2:30. And again, anybody wants to contact me, sorah@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys again soon. Okay, Lynn, thank you.
Thank you
Steve,
so much.
thank you. Look at your smiling face. Thank you.
Bless you, love you, and
Love you.
look forward to seeing you again next week.